everyone, and welcome to Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails, the weekly podcast that helps you grow your business, improve your life, and enjoy yourself along the way. I'm your host, Alan Langer, and every week we try to bring you the best thought leaders, the best business leaders, and the best minds out there to help you succeed in business and in life. So sit back, relax, grab your pad, your pen, and your favorite beverage, and enjoy the next episode of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. This is your host, Alan Langer, with episode number 44 tonight. We are at 44 episodes. Love this. We're just moving along with one great guest after another. And tonight I got a little bit of a off the beaten path kind of guest, someone who's not going to talk directly about sales or marketing, but he's going to talk about critical thinking, which we all need in business and in life. And I think this is really going to be an enjoyable episode because I think what my guest, Dan Manning, is going to talk about is really going to help us all. So before we get to Dan, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. The website is marketingandSalesPodcast.com, marketingandSalesPodcast.com. The Ask Alan segment, if you just click on that little link, you go to the form, send me a question. We've got a cool question coming up from Beverly later tonight. If I select your question to read on the air, you get a free signed autographed copy of my book. So do that. Send in as many questions as you want. I get about 15 to 20, sometimes 30 questions a week. I go through them and I pick the best one that I have for my guest. Okay, so let's get into this. Without further ado, Dan Manning, thank you for joining us tonight. This is going to be really exciting. I'm happy you're here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
So just so everyone knows, Dan Manning, he is a former Air Force fighter pilot, which just the thought of actually me, flying a plane, I have a fear of heights, so I can't even imagine doing anything like that. So you're already a hero in my book for being a veteran and for flying planes. So thank you for your service. Awesome stuff. But what I believe, and I'm going to have him tell this a little more eloquently than me, but he got into critical thinking, creative thinking, collaborative thinking, and he actually trains people on how to think better. And his product that he does that is called Human Intelligence, or hashtag Human Intelligence. So, Dan, why don't you tell us about that and how you got into what you do and how you help people?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So when I sort of tell the story of my life and my background, I say I spent 25 years in the Air Force, and I just recently retired just over a year ago, actually, a year and a few months. And as you said, during that time, I spent the first half as a fighter pilot. I flew the A-10, which is a single seat fighter aircraft. And then in the second half of my career, I was a military diplomat. So I'm a Russian speaker. I did a lot of work with the Russians over Syria, ensuring that we weren't running airplanes into each other. And what I found was that the problems that I was tasked to solve were not solved well by the solutions that the Department of Defense is the best at using. So as you might expect, the Department of Defense likes to solve problems either with brute force or with lots of cash. But the problems that I was tasked to tackle, things like deterring the Russians in the Baltics, or helping to build the Afghan Air Force, or fighting the ISIS small drone problem where they turned these small, almost toy-like drones into grenade-carrying weapons. It didn't matter how much force we had, and it didn't matter how much money we had. We had to find better ways of solving the problem. And what that came down to was just thinking better, right? More creativity, more collaboration, more critical thinking. So I took that experience, combined it with the research from psychology and from neuroscience about how we think, to turn those into just very practical tips that people can use to think better.
So think about this, folks, that you're listening. Like, we get stressed out about, oh my God, I didn't put my social media post on tonight, or the bill that I didn't pay my bill today. Dan was dealing with drones that dropped grenades and figuring that stuff out. So a lot of things you need to put in perspective. So again, that's awesome, and thank you for what you did for the country. And I totally forgot. What are you drinking tonight, Dan? Because this is Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. So what do you have tonight?
Yeah, so I'm drinking a bourbon whiskey. It's from Bowman's, which is a small distillery in Virginia. So I was assigned to the Pentagon.
Isaac Bowman. Yes, I've actually heard about that. And you're in Alabama.
Yeah, I am.
Well, cheers to you. I actually have a Grenache tonight. I'm a little lightweight tonight, but that's okay. So a little virtual cheers to you. Thank you for being on the podcast
Cheers.
once again. Cheers. So let's talk about, so tell us how, so most of my audience are small business owners. They're entrepreneurs. I do have a lot of sales rep, a lot of marketers, but most of them are entrepreneurial minded. So how do you give us a couple of tips on how an entrepreneur starting their own business can start thinking differently, or maybe some of the traps that you see that business owners fall into by thinking the wrong way?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most common traps that we all fall into, whether it's in starting a business or solving any type of problem, is that we rush to the solution and we sort of skip over the finding the problem part, right? So I talk to lots of folks and I'll ask them, so what's your big plan, or what's your goal? What are you working towards? Whether it's, the very big goal is in, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Or it's, what do you want your business to achieve this year? And usually they haven't thought very much about that, right? Usually they haven't really dug into what is the problem that I'm trying to solve, because we're wired to go for solutions in a way that sort of puts defining the problem on the back burner, right? Especially people that have typically you say like a type A personality, people that are biased for action, people that want to start doing something. They get a lot of comfort out of doing, and they get less comfort out of like being deliberative with themselves and introspective and thinking about, what am I really trying to do? What solution am I really trying to provide for my customer? Or what business am I really in, right? Am I in the business of selling this or selling that, or providing a service, or maybe it's not selling at all? And I think really taking the time to define the problem is probably the key element there to start thinking better.
Wow. So what kind of clients do you normally work with? Are they large corporations? Are they small? Or do you run the gamut between all of them?
Yeah, so I've worked with, because I came from the Air Force, I have a lot of ties back into the Department of Defense, and obviously I speak that language and have a lot of experience there. So I get several clients from DoD, but also what I find are the clients that I most want to work with, and the ones that get the most benefit from my services, are those businesses that are sort of they've been in business for about a year, about 2 years. They've achieved some success, but now they're really looking to level up, right? They've achieved just about all they can do from doing what they've always done. And now they're looking for some different ideas, some different ways of thinking, so they can really advance their business.
So you're helping them. I don't want to, the term is so overused, but think outside the box, think differently to actually get their success moving.
So that's part of it. And in fact, when I talk to people, thinking outside of the box is something that comes up all the time. And I have this little demonstration now that we're on Zoom, and it's for people that are at home. It looks like or people that are just watching listening to the audio. It looks like I'm holding up a cube, right?
It does. So yes, it looks like you're holding up a cube. Yep.
Yeah, so it's got 6 sides, and people talk about thinking outside the box, and you want to get beyond the box that's here. But this box is just an illusion, right? It's just a piece of paper that's folded in a way to make you believe that it's a box. It's not a box at all. So what happens is our brains create these illusions, and they're very attractive to us, right? We like to hold on to that illusion and believe that this is the problem that we're actually trying to solve. But I say that you can't think outside the box until you understand the box that you're in. And that's what critical thinking is, right? Critical thinking is really assessing the problem, really thinking, what am I trying to do around here? What resources will be available to me to solve this problem? And now once I do all that work to really understand what is the problem, now I can start using creativity to come up with solutions that solve the problem I have, rather than the problem that I wish I had, or that just satisfies the illusion in my brain.
Wow, that's really fascinating. So that's what you really mean by critical thinking and creativity is understanding your surroundings. And I like what you said, understand the box first before you can actually think outside of it. That's really cool. Do many people that you talk to, are they like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense once you actually say it? Because that just happened to me when you just said that. I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So it does, it definitely takes some conversation, because most of the things that I work with are things that people believe that they understand, but they're really kind of loose with their language. Things like creativity, and critical thinking and trust and collaboration. So it takes a little bit of time to make sure that we're talking about the same thing, right? So I'll explain something in a way that's both visual as well as maybe a story that's attached to it. And now that it starts to click in, and they understand what it is.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. So when people reach out to you, what are they trying to fix? Like they see Dan Manning and he helps with critical thinking, but what do you think they're actually trying to fix? Is it something? Do you fix something that they're not expecting, or when they talk to you, they're like, yes, this is what I want? Is there a misconception on what you actually train?
Yeah. So in fact, I learn that all the time. I do a lot of experiments with my, on my website, and then just as I'm working to generate leads and start conversations with people. And what I expected was that the customers that would come to me would have some type of business problem, right? That they would want to know how to launch their next product, or get into a new market, or streamline some processes. But what I found is, probably about 60 to 70% of the people that seek me out to talk, I ask them early, like, what is your biggest problem? It's usually something that's in their personal life, honestly. And I'm not a life coach, but it's things like how do I continue to run my business while I take care of my elderly parent who can't live at the retirement community where she lived before because of the pandemic? Or like, how can I balance my kids' education and being home for school while I need to be working my business? Or very commonly, like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I'm in a job, I'm a mid-career professional, and I'm pretty good at what I do, but this just isn't rewarding to me. I know that I'm capable of more, but how can I figure out how to move to something else, or even if I should move to something else? And those, I think, are the bigger problems that traditionally you don't think about with critical thinking, but that's where it has the most payoff for people in their individual lives.
And you can help them with that to think properly about those issues that they're facing.
Yeah, because so the end lesson for creativity, how to be more creative and how to be a better critical thinker, actually comes down to collaboration. Right? There's a pretty famous story about Sir Francis Galton, who in 1906 he takes an ox to a county fair in England, and he asks people there to make an estimate of how much they think this ox weighs. So people turn in over the week or so all these different guesses, and he gets about 1,800 guesses of the weight of this ox. And he takes them home and he lines them all up, and then he finds the median answer. This is the one that's right in the middle. So half the people thought that the ox weighed more, and half the people thought the ox weighed less. And the median guess was 1,196 pounds. The ox weighed 1,197 pounds. So what happens is, it turns out that when we collaborate with other people, we think better. And I'll tell you, as a introvert myself and someone who enjoyed flying a single seat fighter, pretty disappointing to me to realize that I don't think best by myself. I think better when I think with other people. Because those illusions that we were talking about, those exist in our brains. But when I show up and I start collaborating with you, I bring my illusions with me, but I can't see them myself, right? That's why it's an illusion. But you can see the illusions that are fooling me, and I can see the illusions that are fooling you. And if we can collaborate in a psychologically safe, trusting environment, now those illusions start to shatter, and we start getting closer and closer to like actual knowledge. Like, what is the real problem that we're working on? So simply working with other people in this trusting environment allows us to be better critical thinkers.
That is so fascinating. You just reminded me, there's a show that I watch with my daughter. It's called Brain Games. Have you seen that?
I have with my son. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I forget who hosted. He's really good. He's like a critical thinker kind of guy, but he hosts this show.
Yeah.
And one of the shows was about, they had this giant jar of either marbles or M&Ms or something. And it did exactly what you said. They had a bunch of people guess, and the median guess was literally 3 or 4 off of what was actually in the jar. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I do that with these ping pong balls in this container.
So you do the same
during
thing?
During my workshops. And obviously, the more people you have, the closer you get on average, 2 or 3 people don't think as well as 50 people, for instance, in that type of exercise. But it's something that very quickly demonstrates how much better we think together. That our collective error is always less than the average of our individual errors, right? So each of us may be off by lots,
right?
But when we come together, we're actually very close.
But when you say come together, that they're not talking about how many are in there. It's just what they're thinking. But because they're in a group, that median will be closer to the correct answer.
Right.
Is that what you mean?
And that's it is. The ping pong balls is just a demonstration of that, right? But when people make their guess about how many ping pong balls are in the container, they feel safe about sharing their guess. Right. Nobody feels embarrassed about whatever their number is. So they offer up like their essentially their unbiased guess. It's only biased by themselves. It's not biased by what the rest of the group thinks. A couple times when we were first practicing on how to do these on Zoom, I would have people put their guess in the chat, or maybe still sometimes people will put their guess in a little bit early before I tell them to hit enter. And those early guesses will bias the rest of the group. So if the first person guesses a low number, everyone else kind of starts steering lower on the on their guesses. So it's not an effective demonstration.
Right.
But where it really matters is when we're talking about not about ping pong balls or about oxen, but about how do we come up with great ideas to improve our company, or how do we approach this new market, or how do I figure out where I'm going to be happy. And now having people show up with their whole selves and be able to share their ideas in a psychologically safe environment, that's what allows us to shatter those illusions and get closer to the knowledge we need to solve problems.
Wow, this is really fascinating. So is there a way to take this type of process, this thought process you're talking about, and apply it to a sales situation where I'm talking to a potential customer? Is there a way I can do some critical thinking about how I'm presenting or how the customer is thinking? Is that something that you talk about at all?
So in fact, I would sort of start the other way. I would start with the collaboration part. And I read your book as we were preparing for this
yes,
this
you
podcast.
Did. Thank you for doing that.
No, it's thanks for writing it. There was a lot of great lessons in there, and I love the approach that you take to helping your customer, right? Mm-hmm. Essentially, you're talking about how do I collaborate with this customer to solve a problem.
Correct. Yeah.
And my wife also has a fresh roasted coffee business that she started here in Alabama. So I will help her on the weekends sometimes go out to farmers markets and sell coffee, right? And that's old fashioned selling, right? You're set up. People walk by, people are interested in coffee. And so I learned over the past couple of years of helping her do that, just some of those basic lessons, but it still comes down to collaboration, right? If someone walks up, I ask them, are you a coffee drinker? And people who are coffee drinkers are proud to say that they are. And now I ask them, so what kind of coffee do you drink? And we start a conversation about what they typically drink. And now I can help them to make a recommendation about, we have these different coffees, but based on what you normally drink, this is probably the one that would be best for you. And now that collaboration puts them in a different place, right? Now they're in a place where they are willing to share that information. And if I can create this atmosphere of psychological safety and of trust, then they'll tell me what type of coffee they drink, right? They'll tell me, or they'll say, I drink whatever's in the cabinet. I'm not too picky about it. But the point is they share that information, and that I need their information if I want to collaborate with them to solve their problem. And ultimately, if the product that I'm selling is the thing that solves their problem, then we're going to be able to meet somewhere.
And you can also take that a step further. Like once they tell you, I like, hazelnut, and that's what that's going to solve my flavored coffee problem. And then you say, well, let me introduce some social proof. Most people who live in the Alabama area here, they buy a lot of hazelnut coffee, and all of a sudden now they feel a lot better because not only you're collaborating, but they're feeling a part of a tribe they're not the only person purchasing that hazelnut.
You're exactly right about the tribe as well, right? I mean, the absolute best is when you're talking to someone about the coffee and one of our customers walks by and says, hey, you need to buy that coffee. It's fantastic, right? It's completely unsolicited passerby talking about it. But building that tribe is so important because building that tribe helps them to feel trust, right? To feel trust inside that group. And people that are a part of a group are more likely to share with that group and to take an attitude where they're open to ideas and open to sharing information.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic. You're walking down the street and three people are looking up. What do? You look up.
Sure.
Because you feel comfortable because you're part of that group. Like, I'm not going to be embarrassed looking up because other people are doing it.
Exactly.
That's how the human brain works. And if you use that in a selling situation, and it's not manipulative. Some people think, well, I'm manipulating the customer. You're actually not. You're actually just invoking a natural human brain behavior that makes them feel comfortable.
Right.
And you're actually making them feel more comfortable to purchase your product by just using that technique, which is very common.
Yes. No, I think, yeah, you're exactly right. It is not. In fact, I teach in some of my classes, like how to tell when you're being manipulated, right? How to tell, like, here are the tricks, but there's no trick to human connection, right? No. Either you believe that I'm an authentic human that you can trust, or you don't. And I'm not going to be very effective at tricking you for very long.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I always make notes as we talk because I do a little podcast teaser when this comes out, and I put that on LinkedIn, and I try to, like, mark the points of the things that the guest said that are good. So far I've got 6 of them for you. So I'm way over what I need. So it's just really good.
I'll slow down.
No. This is awesome. Now you sent me some questions. We haven't gotten any because we're just having a great conversation, but I absolutely love this question. So I'm going to ask it. You write, when we are making decisions like whether or not to make a purchase, how are critical thinking and creativity in play? I love that. Please tell our audience what you mean by that and how that works.
Yeah. So the first is with critical thinking. So when I talk about critical thinking, I say that critical thinking is sorting between facts, beliefs, and uncertainty, right? So the things that are facts are those things that are observable, objective. These are observations that are backed by evidence. These are things that are generally, there's some proof around those, right? Certainly math is one of those facts, but also like what my current inventory is or what my actual problem is turns out to be a fact a lot of times. If I have a flat tire, then I need a new tire on my car, right? That's or I have a flat tire, that's a fact, right? And now there are things on the other end that are just pure uncertainties. For instance, I may not know how much a tire would cost. I don't know if the store would have the tire that I need in stock, or if I'm going to have to wait. I don't know what's going to happen later in the day. Am I going to have an emergency where I need to manage my time and go pick up my son from school or something? So I've got facts on one end, uncertainty on the other. And then in the middle, though, are our beliefs. And our beliefs are those things that have to bridge the gap between facts and uncertainty. And our beliefs are made up of everything that is us. All of my education, my experience, all those cognitive illusions that I was talking about, my previous experience buying a tire, all those things go together. But what happens when we don't think critically is sometimes we will treat our beliefs as facts, right? We will treat a belief that getting a tire is going to take all day, right? Because the last time or the last 2 times I went to a store, it took me forever, and I'm stuck in a cramped waiting room, and it's an uncomfortable experience. But the reality is that isn't a fact. That doesn't have to always be the case. There may be a great tire company that's just down the road where maybe they'll give me a loaner, or maybe they have a shuttle, or maybe they have a good Wi-Fi or something that I can use and get some work done. But I treat my previous experiences as facts, and that leads me to make bad decisions. But once I can sort of sort all those out and understand, like, here are the actual facts of the matter. I do have a flat tire, but I can go and I can call a few stores and find out where who has the tire that I need and what their wait time is. Now I can start making a better decision about how to manage my life and fix this problem. And then once I sort of understand the problem, now it's time for creativity. And creativity is the production of ideas that are new and useful. So now it's time for me to take everything that I learned when I was thinking critically and apply it to come up with some new solution. Maybe I can call an Uber to go take me to wherever I need to go right away. Maybe I don't have to worry about getting the tire fixed now. Maybe I can fix it later. Maybe there's somebody that'll come and change my tire for me, right? Maybe they'll come to my house, but I can start looking for something that's a little bit different in that solution. And when we're buying something, we are running through all of those. We have the opportunity to run through that cycle for every purchase that we make. Sometimes we'll just keep making the same purchase over and over because that's what we've done. Other times, maybe we have a new problem. We don't know how to solve it. But where it can all work out better is when we can collaborate with someone that has the knowledge and experience to help us make a better decision.
So do you think, so you read my book, so you know I talk a lot about riptotrustrophobia, which is the fear of meeting with a salesperson, because everybody hates meeting with a salesperson because of past experiences. So it sounds like exactly what you're talking about. They're making a bad decision because they know that for the most of the time, the previous time they met with salespeople, the experience was terrible.
Yes. Yeah, this is 100% right. And so I take my belief and I act as if it's a fact that all salesmen are horrible. All salespeople are horrible.
Yeah. Wow. This is fascinating.
And that's not actually the case,
Yeah. That's why when I train, if you actually become the salesperson that the person is not expecting, like they're expecting the salesperson who's not going to listen to them, who's going to rip them off, who's going to, be in it for themselves. If you're actually not that person, you are like a god to them because they start referring you everywhere because you're the person that they didn't expect.
No, yes, you're exactly right. And I think after reading your book and having this conversation, right, it keeps coming back to trust, right? Yes. And then at Human Intelligence, we define trust as believing that when given a chance, you are not going to do something damaging to me, right? So trust is a choice. I make the choice to believe that Alan's not going to take advantage of me if I tell him, what my actual problem is, or how much money I have to spend, or my previous experience, or the other things I'm looking at. If I trust you, then I'll share that information, and if I don't, you're not getting anything out of me.
Right. And now you're just the typical salesperson that they were expecting. I've told this story before, but you'll appreciate this. I went on a ride along once. This is in my window days. And it was a younger rep. We met this couple on their back porch. I think this is in my book, actually, if I remember correctly. And the experience was so bad with the couple from the rep that I was sitting there next to. He just put pressure on them. He didn't listen. The guy just walked out of we were on the back deck. He walked back in the house. The wife was embarrassed. It was an awful experience for them, but their windows were really bad. Like they needed to replace their windows. And I drove by that house 3 years later and they still had their bad windows. And I couldn't help but think they didn't want to have that experience again. So they'd rather live with terrible windows than deal with what they just dealt with.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that is a great story. What I found is that the harder a decision is, the more likely we are to stick with the status quo.
Yes.
Right. So if I need to make a decision about buying new windows, now I've got to figure out what kind of windows should I get? Should I get the vinyl windows, or I need wood windows? And there's maybe 5 companies. Maybe there's one that's going to give me a great deal. And what's the timeline for getting these done? And I'm going to have to move stuff around my house to make it happen. So let's just not do it.
Yeah.
So what you find is that one of the things that drives that status quo illusion is a fear of future regret. This comes up over and over. People are afraid that in the future, they're going to look back and say, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just stuck with what I was doing. I should have left well enough alone. I shouldn't have made that change. And because of that fear, it leads us to stick with a bad situation for much longer than it would rationally make sense for us to stick with it.
Wow. That's a great, I really like that a lot. Fear of future regret. I'm gonna borrow that from you if you don't mind in future conversations.
Yeah.
I love that. All right, we're moving right along here. So I want to get to the Ask Alan segment, which is a really good question. I had this question come in about 3 weeks ago, but I didn't have a guest that I felt I could ask it to until I got Dan on the show. So listen to this one, and I want to hear how Dan's going to answer this. So this comes from Beverly, and she's way over in Spokane, Washington. So clearly on the other side of the country from Dan and I. But Beverly writes, I seem to always freeze up in tough situations, in sales, in talks with superiors, etc. if you ever have anyone on who talks about confidence or what I can do to unfreeze myself, I would really love for you to ask this question. So Beverly, your prayer is answered. I'm asking that question to Dan. I hope you're listening tonight. How would you answer Beverly with that one, Dan?
So I would answer two different ways, right? The first is just the very practical, tactical answer is to slow down. Slow down your rate of speech. It'll slow down your thinking. It'll make you easier to understand. And it builds in pauses to allow you to think. So it's okay if your brain is running a little bit more slowly. The pauses that you take are only long to you.
Right.
To the people that are listening to you, like, oh, they were very controlled. That was a very controlled delivery. That person has it going on. Mm-hmm. So simply slowing down your speech is going to make it better. On the other hand, it's an illusion that often drives us to freeze up. Right? We believe that maybe this other person is thinking something bad about us, or this other person's going to think that I'm dumb, or I'm incompetent, or I don't know what I'm doing. The odds are that the other person is not thinking about you that much to have those conclusions, right? Yeah. The person that you're talking to is thinking about, what they have to do after work, or, I got to go pick up the kid, or I have this big project I have to do, and they're just barely paying attention to you anyway. So one thing that you can do is to start a conversation with them as if they were a human, right? Ask them, how's your day going? But then genuinely listen, right? What are they thinking about? What's going on? And by having this conversation, you actually start to fill out their personality. So you're not talking to this illusion that you've created. You're talking to another human, and they also see you as a human. And now you can have a human to human conversation and get where you need to be.
Wow, that's great stuff. You just reminded me too. I'm certainly not an expert in critical thinking or anything, but I do consider myself pretty knowledgeable in human behavior. And what you just said there is so important for people to understand. You put so much emphasis on what you think people think about you or look at you, when those people, for the most part, could care less. They really could care less. True. I told this to my daughter about 6 months ago. She was worried about what she was wearing. And I said to her, how many times have you seen someone in the street wearing just a crazy outfit or just something that you would obviously never wear? How much thought did you put into what that person was wearing? And she was like, yeah, I just kind of glanced at them. I said, exactly. So do you think someone's going to care about what color top you're wearing right now? Just wear what's comfortable for you. Nobody is going to care about it. Mm-hmm. So that would be my advice to Beverly, pretty much tagging what you just said, Dan, is you're putting so much emphasis on what you think people are thinking about you, where it's really, they're not thinking nearly as much as what you're envisioning in your head.
That's exactly right. That's great advice.
Yeah. So, well, this has been awesome. We're almost at 40 minutes already, believe it or not. So let's you have a couple more questions. I want to get to one more, because I know I have a lot of small companies here that have small teams. And I know I get people asking, about leadership and about how to have a good team meeting, but you have a question here that was really cool that caught my eye. And I want to ask you this as the final one. And you write, what is the easiest way to make your team more creative? I really like that, because I think if an employee feels like they're part of the team and part of the company culture, and they're helping with their, whatever they're coming up with is helping the company improve, it's just a win-win for everyone. So how would you answer that? What is the easiest way to make your team more creative?
So I've asked this question to hundreds and hundreds of people, and I'll ask it with this. So Alan, can you give me a use for this? If you're listening to just the audio version, it's a brick. Like, what's a use for this brick?
So two things just popped in my head. I can make a building out of it.
Great.
Or I can throw it into a window with a ransom note on it.
Okay, very nice. Good. Now, so the ransom note one, that was pretty good. But think of a creative use for this brick. What's something that you could do that's creative with this?
I would use it as a bookend, hold some books on my shelf.
Great. So you answered that question just like virtually every other person that I've asked. When I first ask, what are some uses for the brick? People will say, well, to build stuff, right? It's literally made for building things. So that's a good answer. Particularly with military groups, it rapidly becomes a weapon where it gets thrown through a window. It's used to put under your tire so your car doesn't roll away. Those typical things that we talk about, right? So this is your brain. It's the left side of your brain. Now, it takes your entire brain to be creative, but it's your left side of the brain just cataloging all the places you've either seen or heard of a brick being used. And you're just repeating all those out, right? But as soon as I ask you, what is a creative use for that brick? Now the question moves from the left side of your brain to the right side of your brain. And now instead of looking for what are the ways that I've seen or heard of it being used, your brain starts asking, what are some possibilities? Like, how could I use this brick in a different way? Probably the most creative or almost bizarre answer that I ever had was this guy who said he could file down his bunions with it. So when
that's
when
funny
I
and
ask
gross
the question,
at the same time.
It is 100%, right? It's a striking visual. But when I asked the question the first time, right, that answer existed in that guy's mind, right? But he didn't provide it, right? He didn't answer about his bunions because there's a pre-conscious process in our brain that's called latent inhibition, and it filters out ideas before you even have the conscious thought of, should I share this or not? So maybe the idea of bunion bounced around somewhere in his brain, but latent inhibition said this is not the right time or place for that. Just keep it to the side. But as soon as I ask him to be creative, those filters start to open up. And now that idea about his bunion, now it comes into his conscious mind and he has a choice. Either he's going to choose to share his bunion problem with the rest of the group that's there, or he's not. But the choice that he makes depends on the psychological safety that exists in the group.
Wow.
So simply by asking people to be more creative, they actually turn out to give more creative answers. And researchers at Yale did a study where they divided a class into 3 groups. They asked one group to write a creative essay, one group to write an analytical essay, and the third group just to write an essay. Then they graded them for creativity. And wouldn't you know it, the people they asked to be creative wrote more creative essays. So the easiest way to get your team to be more creative is just to ask for it.
To ask them to be creative. As simple as that. Wow.
100%.
That is fascinating. And now I'm not going to be able to get rid of the image of this guy filing his bunions with a brick out of my mind for the rest of the night.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Dan, how can people find you if they want to contact you for their business? Or I know you just wrote a book. Tell us a little bit about that. Is it out or is it coming out?
So it is out, available on Kindle on Amazon. It's called Thinking Better, and it's critical thinking and creativity through trusting collaboration. So it's all about the things that we talked about here, how to make yourself and your team more creative, better critical thinkers, and then how to use that to solve tough problems like building strategy. That's
awesome. Yeah. So I encourage everyone, I'm going to get the book myself. Go get Dan's book. And if they want to reach out to you at all, Dan, how can they find you?
Yeah. So the easiest way is through my email address, dan@hi.training, dan@hi.training. And if they want the book, they simply have to ask, and I'll trade the book for a conversation. I'd be glad to learn from a human in exchange for sending them the book. So that's a great way to do it. I also post on LinkedIn. It's a great place to find me there.
Yeah, Dan's got some great stuff on LinkedIn as well, and we've collaborated there as well. So I actually want to personally thank Casey Jones for introducing us. She's awesome, and I wouldn't have met Dan without Casey. So thank you, Casey, if you're listening. Dan, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. This has been awesome. And I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight on episode number 44 of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. Beverly is getting a free book from me, signed by me, because she sent in a question and I read her question. So what are you waiting for? Get to the Ask Alan segment on marketingandsalespodcast.com. Send in the question. If I read it, you get a free copy of my book with my signature. It's going to be worth a lot of money someday. Dan again, for me, thank you for joining us, everyone, tonight, and we will see you again next time.
Thank you.